During my mother's funeral, my mother-in-law was unusually cheerful, almost to the point of being inappropriate. She announced that the house would be passed on to my son, and she even started picking out which room she'd like for herself. When she said she was thinking about taking over one of the rooms, I gently corrected her by clarifying that I was the one inheriting the house. Unperturbed, she argued that since a wife's property typically goes to her husband, the house technically belonged to her son. I was taken aback by her audacity and wondered aloud about the validity of her claim. She cheerfully suggested that we should start getting along better, implying that we might live together in the house. When I questioned what she meant by getting along, she boldly declared that she intended to turn this room into her own. She justified her intrusion by stating that it would be wasteful to leave such a beautiful house with empty rooms when we could both live there. Throughout this interaction, it seemed my mother-in-law was completely oblivious to my grief over losing my mother. The timing of her remarks was incredibly insensitive. This house was filled with precious memories of my father and my late mother, and I could not fathom sharing it with my unreasonable mother-in-law. I felt my husband was also to blame for not intervening. Before deciding to move out, I took matters into my own hands. At 39 years old, having thought I missed my chance at marriage and remained single well into my 40s, I had almost given up on the idea. However, life took a turn when I met Eric through a mutual friend. Eric, 5 years my junior, became my husband. He is a considerate man who respects my choices. Discussing our honeymoon plans, I mentioned Hawaii, but Eric preferred Venice, Italy, reminding me that he'd be happy with either as long as we were together. Just then, he shared that his mother wanted to live with us due to his father's deteriorating health and her struggles with managing alone. I understood her difficulties, but we had agreed before our wedding that living together wasn't an option. Eric reassured me he would speak to his mother about it, always sensitive to my concerns and wishes. I've always carried a tinge of guilt when I reflect on my life's joys because, although I've met wonderful people along the way, I deeply regret that my father couldn't witness my wedding. He passed away 4 years before I got married, and I never had the chance to share that special day with him or reassure him about my future. My father was a dedicated executive at a small to medium enterprise. Despite the modest size of the company, he earned a decent living, and I held immense respect for him. His work ethic only deepened my admiration, especially as I began my career as an office employee and understood firsthand the complexities of professional life. Then, 3 years after I got married, my mother also passed away. During her funeral, my husband consistently checked on me, asking if I was okay and if I needed to take a break. Unlike most modern funerals, we held my mother's at our family home, which was spacious enough for the occasion. My husband's support during this time was a true testament to his character. I felt truly fortunate to have him by my side. It was during my mother's funeral that my mother-in-law, Samantha, showed up to express her condolences. Although we had never lived together and our interactions were minimal, I appreciated her presence. However, it was also during this sorrowful event that I began to see another side of her. After the funeral, Samantha approached me with what seemed initially like genuine concern. She thanked me for my help during the funeral, acknowledging how smoothly everything went because of my assistance, but as the formalities ended, her demeanor shifted abruptly. She commented on the splendid house and casually remarked that we could ease up on the formalities now the funeral was over. I was startled by her change in tone. It seemed she was initially pretending to empathize with my grief. Walking deeper into the house, Samantha began eyeing the rooms, deciding which she might claim for herself. This took me by surprise, and I tried to interject, explaining that the house was messy and unprepared for such decisions. Unperturbed, she brushed off my concerns, boldly stating that the house should belong to her son, and even pondering out loud about taking one of the rooms for herself. This interaction left me in a difficult position, trying to honor my parents' memory while dealing with Samantha's forwardness. It was a delicate balance, maintaining respect for the family while asserting the house's personal significance for me. While discussing the inheritance of my family home, my mother-in-law casually insinuated that the property should belong to her son, my husband, since after all, a wife's belongings typically become her husband's. She smirked as she made this point, aware that my parents had no other children to inherit the estate. I sighed, doubtful of the claim's legitimacy, while she cheerfully suggested that we should now get along better, even proposing to take over one of the rooms as her own. When I nervously asked if this meant we were going to be living together, she didn't hesitate to confirm, excited by the idea of not having to manage everything alone concerning her son anymore. With such a splendid house, she reasoned, it would be wasteful to leave rooms unoccupied. This conversation unfolded just after my mother had passed away, making her timing and remarks appear incredibly insensitive. As my frustration grew, my husband finally noticed the tension and stepped in. He was quick to challenge his mother, insisting that it was neither the time nor the place for such discussions. Despite his firm approach, his mother was unyielded, questioning why he was making a fuss. He then firmly asked her to leave, managing to escort her out of the house. I was grateful for his intervention and expressed my thanks, relieved to have him support me during such a difficult conversation. In the following days, as we started to process the loss and organize my mother's affairs, my husband and I discussed what we should do with the house. Recognizing our cramped living situation, he suggested moving back to my family home, which seemed sensible given the space and the potential for starting a family. I agreed, seeing the practicality of his idea. However, as we prepared for the move, he hesitantly introduced a new complication. Considering the ample space and empty rooms at the house, he thought it might be a good idea for his parents to move in with us. I was stunned by his suggestion, feeling as though the boundaries we'd set were beginning to blur. Recently, I've started noticing a change in my husband that has left me questioning his true character. Initially, I believed he valued and prioritized my opinions, but now I'm not so sure. His constant agreement with my mother-in-law's suggestions and his proposal that we all live together have made me wonder if he might be too agreeable or perhaps even a pushover. Despite my clear stance against living with his parents, he continues to entertain the idea, seemingly placing his mother's desires above my own. I've made my feelings clear. We won't live together, I've told him repeatedly. Yet each time he counters with, "But Mom keeps insisting on it." During my mother's funeral, he had scolded his mother for her untimely suggestion of moving in, standing up for me against the idea of cohabitation. When I remind him of this, he admits, "Yes, I was upset about her barging into the house, but that doesn't mean I'm entirely against living together. I just thought such an important decision shouldn't be made casually in that setting." It's perplexing. He seems to nod in agreement with my stance when we talk privately, but his actions suggest a leaning towards his mother's wishes. Moreover, he avoids making definitive decisions, maintaining a distance as if to remain neutral, perhaps unconsciously convincing himself of his impartiality. It's incredibly frustrating. I am adamantly opposed to living with someone who barged into my parents' house on the day of the funeral and suggested claiming a room as her own. "Please convey this to your mom," I insist firmly. He hesitates, then responds somewhat dismissively, "Why? You seem bothered by it." "Fine, I'll let her know." While I had mentally prepared myself for the possibility of living with my in-laws when we first got married, witnessing my mother-in-law's behavior during my mother's funeral has drastically changed my perspective. The idea of living together in the cherished home my father built is now unthinkable, especially given my husband's lack of assertiveness. When he finally conveyed my opposition to cohabitation, my mother-in-law called me directly to protest. "Why are you opposing cohabitation when there's such a spacious house? You're Eric's wife now, and his father and I are your parents too, right? Why such strong opposition to living together with us?" This situation has made it clear that setting and maintaining boundaries with my husband and his parents will be crucial for preserving my peace and respecting the legacy of my family home. I firmly reiterated my refusal to live with my in-laws, explaining that taking care of my husband with his mobility issues was already challenging enough for me alone. My mother-in-law accused me of abandoning them, which forced me to remind her of the very real concerns my husband had previously shared. Despite feeling empathy for my father-in-law's health issues, I couldn't overlook the likelihood that their care responsibilities would largely fall on me if we lived together. For me, even considering cohabitation would require a significant shift in the attitude and expectations of both my husband and my mother-in-law. It was a non-negotiable condition. Only a few days after my mother-in-law had sharply called me heartless, I noticed my husband moving furniture around in our living room, seemingly making space for more than just the two of us. Curious, I asked him what he was doing, wondering if he was arranging space to store moving boxes. His reply unsettled me. "No, I'm making room for 2 beds here." The mention of 2 beds immediately filled me with dread, and I cautiously asked if his parents were coming to stay. To my dismay, he said, "No, they're moving in today." I was blindsided by this news. Despite my clear objections, it seemed my husband and mother-in-law had decided to force this living arrangement upon us. "Why is this happening?" I demanded, my frustration growing as he explained that their lease was up and they had decided to move in with us immediately instead of renewing it. "It'll be a bit cramped for 4 people, but we're moving soon, right? Just bear with it for a little while," he reasoned. Distressed, I reiterated my stance. "That's not what I meant. Why is cohabitation even on the table? I've said it before. I don't want to live with someone who barged into my parents' house on the day of the funeral and suggested taking over this room." He promised to talk to his mother about it, but his words provided little comfort. "We'll be living together from now on, so please try to get along." Annoyed, I confronted him. "Why do you always prioritize everything your mom says?" He tried to clarify. "It's not about prioritizing her. I listened to both of your opinions and made a judgment." However, it was becoming increasingly clear that when it came to my mother-in-law, my husband's ability to remain objective was compromised. He seemed unwittingly swayed by her, believing he was making independent decisions. My view of him had always been that of a kind and considerate partner, but in conjunction with my mother-in-law, he was proving to be quite the challenge, pushing me into an unwanted cohabitation with my in-laws. As we welcomed them into our already cramped apartment, my mother-in-law began to complain about the living conditions. Apologizing for the sudden and cramped addition of 2 more people, I reassured them that we would manage until we could move to a more suitable living situation. Despite my father-in-law Benjamin's polite demeanor, it soon became apparent that he was likely to follow my mother-in-law's lead, gradually conforming to her ways and becoming another yes man. A few days into our new living arrangement, my mother-in-law asked me to run an errand to buy a medicated patch. This request, made without my input, was minor, but it hinted at possible future oversteps. The more I thought about it, the more unsustainable living together seemed, especially as they prepared for their move to my parents' home. Determined to shield my parents' home from becoming just another residence, I started making behind-the-scenes arrangements. My mother-in-law, clearly excited about moving into the spacious house, was unaware of my plans. After a tense period of cohabitation, I finally disclosed my decision to renounce my inheritance. With the official court approval in hand, I explained to her that the house held immense sentimental value for me. I couldn't bear the thought of her living there, so I decided to let go of the house, preserving it as a beautiful memory in my heart. My mother-in-law was incredulous, exclaiming, "What madness possessed you? Even if you were letting it go, you could have sold it for money." "Why abandon the house?" I responded calmly, explaining that selling the house would only lead to her relying on that money next. "I thought it would be clearer if I simply had nothing to offer," I told her. She retorted sharply, "We moved out of our previous place for this move, you know." "What are you doing? How will you make it up to us?" I stood my ground firmly. I have consistently opposed cohabitation, and yet without proper discussion, you forced this upon me. Therefore, I took a firm stance. Both my husband and mother-in-law seemed stunned upon learning about my renunciation of the inheritance. Their faces drained of color, and they were left speechless, their strength sapped. Benjamin looked bewildered as he watched the unfolding drama, observing the impact of my decision on the two of them. Despite the tension in the air, I was determined not to back down. Turning to Eric, I said firmly, "I've been thinking about getting a divorce. What do you think?" My husband's reaction was a stuttering, "Divorce?" before his mother quickly interjected, urging him to divorce me immediately. I had anticipated her rush to demand a divorce, but I needed to see if Eric could make an independent decision at such a critical moment. "Mom?" Eric mumbled, seemingly caught off guard, his response lagging, but my decision was becoming clearer by the second. My mother-in-law quickly snapped, "Fine, divorce is the only option." At this, my father-in-law chimed in somewhat helplessly, "Eric, it can't be helped. Your mom insists." Eric then said, "Well, you seem to want a divorce too, and maybe that's for the best." This response solidified my belief that both he and my father-in-law were too easily swayed by my mother-in-law's influence. His words made it sound as if he was changing his stance just to appease me. "Very well," I declared. "Let's proceed with the divorce. I'll be moving out with minimal belongings." That night, I stayed at a budget hotel to clear my mind. Urgent matters awaited the next day, so I took half a day off work and headed back to the courthouse. A few days later, my mother-in-law called me, demanding answers. "What's going on? It seems that house is becoming yours. Why this sudden outburst?" She suspected foul play. "Ah, did you find out through the estate division process?" I replied. "Yes, that house belongs to me." "You forged documents and deceived us," she accused. I calmly refuted. "Why would I forge documents meant for court submission? Those are genuine." "Then why is the house becoming yours when you were supposed to renounce the inheritance?" she pressed. I explained, "Well, right after that, I promptly withdrew the application. Renouncing an inheritance is difficult once accepted. However, it takes about a month for the renunciation application to be accepted, during which time it can be withdrawn at any point. The documents I showed my in-laws were not acceptance-related. They were from the application stage. I intentionally made them believe I had relinquished the house and confronted them with the prospect of divorce to gauge their reactions and decide my next steps. I didn't expect my mother-in-law's mindset to change, but I needed to protect my interests and test the waters of my relationships, revealing their true colors under pressure. However, I held a sliver of hope that my husband would reconsider and express his desire not to go through with the divorce. If he stated that he didn't want to separate, I was prepared to rethink my decision and later clarify the situation regarding the house. Since the house becomes yours then, since it was acquired before the divorce, it's subject to property division, right? My mother-in-law prodded, seemingly eager to claim a share of the house's value. She was determined to extract whatever benefits she could, despite recognizing that the house wouldn't legally be hers. I had anticipated this line of questioning. If the house were jointly acquired, it would indeed be considered marital property and subject to division, I explained. However, it's a unique asset acquired through inheritance, which is exempt from property division. Unfortunately, specific assets like this aren't eligible for division. Undeterred, she continued, "What about the money that would come to Eric through the property division?" I calmly responded, "We've only been married for a few years, so there's hardly anything substantial to divide, perhaps just the car, though there's still an outstanding loan on it." Accusing me of selfishness, she called me heartless and declared, "I'm protecting that house because it holds precious memories of my parents. I don't want people like you living there. If you have any further complaints, please go through a lawyer." After the call with my mother-in-law, the divorce proceedings moved forward smoothly. Presumably, she urged my husband to expedite the divorce. Regardless of her intentions or actions, the divorce was finalized, allowing me to move on from this tumultuous chapter in my life. After the divorce was finalized, I felt a tremendous sense of relief wash over me, as if I had successfully protected my father's cherished home from any potential damage or misuse. Free from the complexities of dealing with my in-laws, I could finally breathe easier. Following the split, my former in-laws remained in the apartment where my ex-husband and I once lived together. Even with one fewer person, the small space must have felt cramped and limiting. My former mother-in-law, now faced with the need to find new housing, encountered difficulties due to their age, which presented challenges in passing rental application screenings. As a result, my ex-husband took it upon himself to rent a smaller single-family home for them. Although it was a house, the rent was likely higher than that of the apartment, placing additional financial responsibilities on him. Supporting his parents in this new arrangement, he faced a challenging path ahead. Initially thrilled with the prospect of moving into the large house my father had left behind, my former mother-in-law now found herself settling into a considerably smaller and likely more expensive home, which must have been a source of disappointment for her. As for me, embarking on this new chapter in the house my parents left to me brought a renewed sense of peace and warmth. It felt as though my parents' presence still permeated the space, offering comfort and solace as I moved forward with my life. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing for more updates. Until next time, take care.